Yogena chittasya padena vacham malam sharirasya cha vaidyakena yopakrotam savaram muninam patanjali pranjali ranatosmi stuve patanjalim vyasam shankaram cha munitrayam katra sutrasya bhashyasya kramat vivaranasya cha. We were discussing the 52nd sutra of Sadhanapada, that is Tataha Kshiyati Prakashavaranam. That is the sutra which introduces, creates a prelude to the discussion on dharana. So what the sutra says is, through this pranayama and pratyahara, the avarana or the concealing veil, the curtain that conceals or hides the light within our chitta or mind system is removed. That's the meaning. So what it means is, through this pranayama and pratyahara, when we practice this breath control and withdrawal of our mind and senses from external objects, it gradually takes away the concealing curtain, the veil, so that the light within, the light that is already there within us gets revealed. Now, in fact, this actually provides a clue as to how we can test whether these asanas and pranayama, pratyahara, all these are actually working or not. So when the inner light gets revealed, the first thing that we experience is peace of mind. That's a normal language, or we get tranquility of mind. Now, what is meant by the tranquility of mind? The mind remaining in a state of equilibrium, a degree of even-mindedness, without any wavering. That's what we normally call peace of mind. Peace of mind doesn't mean that something we acquire or something that we lose. Peace of mind really means the mind actually returning to its own latent original state. I mean, that is why avaranam here means chitta malam or kleshas. Avidya, smita, raga, dvesha, abhinivesha, these pancha kleshas we already discussed at the beginning of the sadhana pada. So all these kleshas here means, let's say, you can call them obstacles, you can call them impurities in the form of extreme likes and dislikes, extreme degree of self-assertiveness, asmita, and again, moving away from things and going against things. All these are different different manifestations of the waverings of mind. I mean, how the mind begins to agitate. These are different forms of mental agitations. All these slowly come down, and then you feel inner tranquility. And along with that also comes a kind of clear-sightedness, which roughly we can say a kind of, we will be able to get a hold on our own mind, our own emotions, our own feelings. That's why when we step into yoga, what is really happening is we are able to get an idea of what is actually going on in our own mind, and we are able to, we will be able to manage our own mind, our own emotions, our own feelings. When we become angry, We become angry, but we also become aware of the fact that we are becoming angry. So these two things happen. You become excited or you become anxious, but you also get a feeling or awareness of the fact, well, I'm unnecessarily getting excited. When you become aware of the fact that you are getting excited, you become also aware of the fact that you are getting excited unnecessarily. You become angry and you become aware of your anger. Then you also start feeling, well, really speaking, there is no room for anger. You become too much worried and you also become aware of your mental state. You're becoming worried. Then immediately you feel this worry is not not a genuine character of your mind. It is something that we should avoid, we should outgrow. So these two processes happen. We become angry, we also become aware of our anger, and then we will be able to get a hold on our anger. We will be able to manage our anger, we'll be able to reduce our anger. So also bitterness, feeling, anxiety, all this. This is what really happens. This happens because, prakashavaranam, kshiyade, that's a language Patanjali uses. The outer covering, the curtain, the concealing curtain that conceals, the veils, the light within, it slowly begins to disappear. And as it begins to disappear, we get this inner feeling of tranquility and peace. That's why these are very important sutras. So important. Next one is Dharana Suti Yogyada Manasa. Dharana is an important subject. We should discuss, of course, here Dharana is to be discussed because next sutra refers to Pratyahara. So actually, Dharana is the sixth, Dhyana is the seventh, Samadhi is the eighth. So Dharana comes after Pratyahara. But really speaking, the disappearance of this Prakashavaranam, this concealing veil, and Dharana and Pratyahara, these all happen simultaneously, more or less. Now, what is Dharana? So, Dharana is an important topic to be discussed because Dharana is the first stepping stone into contemplation, concentration, which we normally call meditation. So, Dharana, Dhyanam, and Samadhi, one leads to the other, and we don't know where one begins and where one ends. So, Dharana immediately leads to Dhyana, and Dhyana leads to Samadhi. Actually, Patanjali is not very elaborate in his descriptions of Dharana, but there is another well-known book, and it is called Yoga Yajnavalkyam. It's a famous book which you may not have read. The particular book, I'm not sure if it has got an English translation, but it's a well-known book which approaches yoga from an entirely different perspective because it brings in a lot of Vedantic ideas, slokas and verses from Bhagavad Gita and other verses are mentioned here. It is a instruction by the sage Yajnavalkya, who is a Vedic sage mentioned in the Yajurveda, in the Shukla Yajurveda, in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, one of the most prominent teachers mentioned in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad is Yajnavalkya. And Gargi is also an equally learned mystic mentioned in the great woman mystic of ancient India mentioned in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. So it is called Yoga Yajnavalkyam. So this particular book explains 5 types of Dharana, again a mental focus. So dharana is defined as the absorption of the mind in the self. Mostly he focuses on anta dharana, because dharana is generally divided into bahya dharana, that is external concentration, and internal concentration. External concentration means fixing our attention, our mind on an image, a kind of a word symbol, maybe Om. Uh, when you concentrate Om on the letter Om, or a symbol, or an image, or a picture, or even a mantra, a sound symbol, a word symbol, verbal symbol, then also it is external concentration. It may roughly be the English translation. It's called Bhagya Dharana. And slowly you first develop a worshipful attitude, a sense of sanctity and sacredness to a mantra, to an image, to a picture, or anything. And that also will help you in the practice of pratyahara. Because if you really want to practice pratyahara, if you really want to change the focus of the mind from external objects to something within, which is what actually dharana actually implies, is it meant concentration, you need a counter focus in your own mental system. But that counter focus uh, should be developed with the help of an external symbol. It could be a picture, an image, maybe a sacred mantra which you hear and you focus on it. Then it's called Bahya Dharana. And then there is called Antara Dharana, it's internal. When you try to observe your mind in your own Atman, or when you concentrate in the inner heart, you just imagine there's a lotus in your own heart, in your center of your being, and you focus on that. So I shall try to explain this in the light of Yoga Yajnavalkya. But we should remember this particular text gives a very elaborate description of dharana with the bija mantras like Vam, Lam, Ram, Yam, Ham, all that. And then you are taught to concentrate, practice dharana or concentration on different places, roughly corresponding to the chakras, but not precisely. We should remember many of these practices have got two dimensions. One is, strictly speaking, the dimension, the traditional Patanjali system yoga, which is less esoteric, and then these practices have got another dimension which is related to tantric, so which normally that kind of concentration should not be practiced unless you get some degree of training, yamas and niyamas. So I shall try to explain this in this particular context. So first of all, there are 5 types of dharanas are explained with the focus on 5 deities in the region of the corresponding element. So you find this, I shall try to explain this. So let me first of all read a few important verses from this important book. It's called Yoga Yajnavalkya. So dealing with dharana, first of all, Yajnavalkya gives a general definition of dharana. This subject is important because dhyana and other related disciplines are mentioned in the coming chapter. But here it is mentioned in more elaborately in this context. So one is dharana lakshana. It is called the characteristics of dharana. So yamadi guna yuktasya manasa sthitihi atmani Dharana ityuchyate sadhi shastra tattvartha vedibhihi. It's very important. This is very important to remember this. That's why the great sages, mystics, how scientific they are. Ajnavalkya says, Yama, Niyama, Asana, Pranayama, Pratyahara. So you should have already practiced these 5 disciplines. Yamas and Niyamas are moral, ethical disciplines. On the one hand, they are just ethical, moral disciplines. On the other hand, they create kind of, let me say, body armor, some kind of defense mechanism to protect you when your mind develops some higher powers. So that those powers should not drag you over a precipice. What does it mean? To give an example, already explained earlier, somebody who has not practiced ahimsa, or let us say non-violence, with the first of yamas, let us imagine he practices dharana or tries to practice dharana. Real dharana is not possible, or he tries to practice pratyahara. Normally, our mind is not able to fully exercise its powers. The reason is the mind flows towards external objects through 5 channels. These 5 channels are the 5 senses of perception. The sense of sight, the eyes, sense of hearing, the ears, sense of smell, the nostril, sense of touch, the skin, and sense of taste. So even when you are seeing an object in front of you, if there's a vehicle, car moving the street, your part of your mind will flow to the sound, and in your mind you will be seeing the car or some vehicle, and also you will be seeing the object right that is actually in front of you. And again, you may be touching the book that you're holding in your hand, the dusk that you are holding with your hand. And some people will be eating, chewing gum while doing all this. So taste, touch, hearing, seeing, and if there is some smell coming from neighboring room, some incense smell, then mind flows towards that also. Which means these 5 channels become the vehicles for distribution of your mental powers. So they get disintegrated, they get dissipated. Now, suppose a person who has got a violent tendency, or is very greedy, it means he is not practicing ahimsa, or asteya, or abharigraha, these yamas. And he tries to do pranayama, he tries to practice concentration, dharana, let us. What happens? Pratyahara, which means he will concentrate his whole mind into the object of his greed. Because your mind will be normally dissipated through the 5 channels. But if a person who is very greedy and if he practices pratyahara, his whole mental focus will be on somehow to get money or wealth, which actually becomes a big problem. Not only for him, for others also. Again, suppose that person is of a violent temper, and if he practices pratyahara, God save us, God save him. So what happens, So Yajnavalkya says, you should have already practiced yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, pratyahara correctly. I mean, once you practice yamas and niyamas, immediately you are ready for practicing asana and pranayama. And then it's easy. Once you get established in yamas or niyamas, already you have acquired the fuel, the energy. Then your vehicle will move forward in the right direction. That's why all the great sages, they always insist yamas and niyamas. That's why you see what he says, yamadi gunayuktasya means somebody who has already got yama, niyama, asana, pranayama. Yamadi means yama, etc. Yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, pratyahara. For such a person, manasaha sthitihi means a state of his mind being established in its own true state in Atman. Atmani dharana iti. That kind of concentration alone is called dharana. That's why it is mentioned you should practice higher concentration only after acquiring yama, niyama, etc. These are very, very important things. And pratyahara will help you to draw your mental focus away from external objects and focus on something sublime, something higher, something noble. It's an important thing. If a person concentrates on something, some external object or any idea without any attempt to practice yamas and niyamas, you know what will happen? That person's mind cannot remain for long in that state of equilibrium. That's why those who accept too much with great mental focus and concentration in some kind of work, it may be music or any of these things, that person's mind will be looking to let up the steam. That's why I'm not going to further details, because we should not. People who do some wonderful musical concert, after some time they want to forget themselves. So what they do, they want to run away from their mind, because mind has accepted so much, means fully focused on some grand performance. Which means it is a kind of pratyahara and dharana. Not, of course, exactly what it means in this Patanjali system of yoga, yajnavalkya, according to yajnavalkya. But it is some kind of dharana. But the point is, after so much of exertion, we have seen some creative writers. I read about them, and also I heard some of them in India, of course. After writing great masterpieces, for some time they want to forget, they have to run away from themselves, and they take alcoholism, drug addiction, because they cannot retain the mental stability without the help of some kind of addiction. Why? Because they are practicing pratyahara and dharana indirectly without getting this defense mechanism fully established. Yamas and niyamas. This is a very, very important point. Remember. That's why psychologically it is very, very important for people who try to want to spend long hours in meditation. First of all, they should somehow practice yamas and niyamas. Now, how to practice this? It is very simple. A sincere seeker of truth will find it very simple. When you get spare time, do something good. When you want to read something good. When you want to speak something good. When you watch the TV, watch something that gives you peace of mind, tranquility, stability, equilibrium, etc. Nothing sensational, nothing that is eye-catching, nothing that may create some kind of excitement. So once we practice this, Actually, we are stepping into the world of yamas and niyamas. Some people will think, yeah, practice of yama niyama means every day morning taking cold water bath and sitting like Padmasana, sitting straight and practicing yamas and niyamas. That's not what actually is meant here. Yamas and niyamas are pure, simple, common sense moral values, which your grandmother, grandfather may have taught you, but you may have ignored it as. Yamas and niyamas are not profound, uh, some kind of sensational practices or some kind of exhibitions. Yamas and niyamas are nothing but the practice of some very, very simple common sense moral values. Try to be a good person, a good human being, do our work, and be satisfied with what you have got. It doesn't mean that you should not aspire for something higher. The aspiration is very good, but the method should be stable, level-headed, so that you won't lose your balance. And then you get this inner purity, contentment, santosha, shauja. Then you'll be able to excel for a long time because you won't be wasting your energy in excitement or this forced concentration. I mean, forced concentration has been. That's why some many creative writers cannot write without drinking alcohol. You know why? That's because they are not able to focus on what they are doing because the mind will be frittered away. That's the idea behind. And once they finish one writing, immediately they should let off the steam. Because that's why Yepuman Adimedhavi Chadurnam Ekamasnude Alpayu Anabadhyova Daridra Paditopiva. A famous verse in Indian classical writings. Those who are extremely, extraordinarily talented and accept too much on achieving something without some degree of moral values, spiritual idealism, either they become short-lived or they become poor or they won't be able to maintain their lineage. Of course, this is Sanskrit verse. You should interpret this ancient verse in the context of modern life. Means extreme exertion, extreme effort in one direction, without some of these moral ethical values, which we call yamas or niyamas, may be enough to do harm to ourselves, may do harm to ourselves. So that's why Yajnavalkya, the great sage, says, Yamadi gunayuktasya manasastitihi. So mind should be Atmani, mean mind should be focused on Atman, concentration. But that person should be Yamadi gunayuktaha, means somebody who's endowed with Yama, Niyama, Asana, Pranayama, Pratyahara. As I get it. First five disciplines. Dharana ityuchyate saddhihi shastra tattvartha vedihi. This is the opinion of the great sages who know the truth and who have studied the classical works on this subject. Then Yajnavalkya gives a short instruction to Gargi. Asmin Brahmapure Gargi yadidam kridayam bhujam tasminneva antarakashe yad vakyakasadaharanam. So this of course, this is a simple method here. The first definition that I gave is a general definition of what dharana is all about. Dharana is the practice of concentration on the mind in Atman by somebody who is already established in the first five fundamental disciplines, that is yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, pratyahara. Next one is this next verse. He's actually giving a simple explanation of what antara dharana means, internal concentration means. अस्मिन् ब्रह्मपुरे गार्गी इदं हृदयाम्बुजं तस्मिन्नेव अन्तराकाशे यत् बाह्याकाशधारणम्. That means focus on this appropriate region of the body. That is, you should be able to focus in your own, at the center of your heart, and at the center of your heart there is the Hridayakasha, and you should be able to focus on that. This is Bhagya. This is the concentration. Now, after that, Dharana Panchadha Prokta Tascha Sarva Pradesh Sunu. Now, 5 types of dharana are mentioned here. This is apparently the most elaborate and scientific description of dharana. Okay, it's a bit too elaborate, and some of them are relevant only in the practice of some spiritual disciplines like tantric meditation practices, etc. So I won't go further into details, but just to get an idea of this. One is, so this is 5 types of dharana I mentioned here. Bhumi, Rabas, Tatha, Tejo, Vayu, Rakashamevacha, Eteshu, Panchadevanam, Dharana, Panchadeshite. So earth, water, fire principle, air principle, and space. That is Bhumi, Rapo, and Alo, Vayu means. Bhumi means earth. You can say earth can mean matter, water principle, air principle, of course, fire principle, and space. These are five Panchamahabhutas. All these Panchamahabhutas represent 5 deities. And one should meditate on the presence of these 5 elements with their corresponding deities in one's own heart, as present in one's own heart. That is each of these deities in the appropriate region of the body. These are all explained here. I'm not going to those details because it's not a Patanjali system, so I won't go that far. And then, of course, there are different deities are mentioned here, Padadekhamadhyantam, Pratisthanam, Prakirtidam, Tatasthanabhivaryandam, Abhasthanam, Prakirtidam, etc. Anabe Hridayantam, Yed Vagnisthanam, Prakirtidam, Hridaya Taluvaryandam, Vayusthanam, Prakirtidam, Atalu Rupavisthanam, Yavad Akashamishite. Means, so this meditative practice is given here, and along with these meditative practices, there are also these 5 bija mantras are mentioned, that is Vam, Lam, Ram, Yam, Kam, etc. So these are 5 types of dharana. But what we are concerned here is simple. Now, in some books you'll find there are some books where 3 types of dharanas are mentioned. There are some books where the 6th, 7th, and 8th, the dharana, dhyana, and samadhi, are sometimes depicted as 3 types of dharana in an ascending order. That is dharana, first step, that is concentrating on 14 matras, sometimes 12 matras. Dhyana is 12 into 2, 12 into 12. And then the next stage is getting absorbed. So that is also one view. We will discuss that in the coming chapter. This is all about dharana. The reason why I took this subject of Yajnavalkya, Yoga Yajnavalkya, is Yajnavalkya makes it very, very clear that dharana and pratyahara should be practiced only by those who are fully established in yamas and niyamas. He is focusing on dharana, but the reason why he mentions only dharana, that is yamadi gunayuktasya, somebody who is only yamasina, etc. Because dharana, real concentration on the mind as being observed in Atman within, That kind of concentration is not possible unless somebody has succeeded in practicing pratyahara. And pratyahara here means taking the mind, taking the focus away from our external objects and keeping the focus within. That's why those who have practiced yamas and niyamas, in their case, the senses will cooperate when you practice pratyahara. The senses will follow the mind. When you're ready to concentrate, your eyes will tell the mind, okay, I'm ready. Your ears will say, okay, I'm ready. Because your eyes and ears and sense of smell and sense of touch and sense of taste will not drag the mind away from its focus towards various sense objects outside. In the case of those who have practiced yamas and niyamas. Those who have not practiced yamas and niyamas, it's called ajitendriyas. In their case, you know what happens? Mind will be dragged by the senses. You see an object, immediately mind will be dragged by the sense of sight. You hear something, mind will be dragged by the sense of hearing. Mind gets attracted towards what it sees, attracted towards what it hears. Mind gets attracted towards what it eats, so the sense of taste also will drag the mind. So in the case of those who have practiced yamas and niyamas, senses will listen to the dictations of the mind. Those who are not practicing yamas and niyamas, mind will listen to the senses, which leads to spiritual disaster. Very, very psychological approach you can find in these verses. Now we'll come to the next sutra, which we actually discussed. Suswa Vishaya Asamprayogi Chittasya Rupanugara Indriyanam Pratyahara. We already discussed here. That means normally what happens, these the indriyas will see an object, and then these indriyas will get absorbed. They become identified with what it connects with, what it is connected to. And then what happens? The form of what indriyas are bringing, the form to which indriyas get connected will be focused on the mind. So mind also will take the Vishayakara, the form of that external object. When you practice Pratyahara, the senses will not bring external impressions to the mind. Senses will block it there. That means, and mind also will not be forced to listen to the senses, and thereby get connected to the external objects. Mind is able to focus on its immediate absolute reality, Atman. So this is called Pratyahara. Tataha Parama Vashyada Indriyana. From this Pratyahara, what happens? Those who are establishing Pratyahara, they are able to get complete control of the senses. That means they are able, they won't be dragged, their mind will not be dragged by the senses to a sense objects. It's called Indriya Jaya, Indriya Siddhi, it's called. Such a person will be able to control his mind and will be able to focus his mind wherever he wants to focus on. As I mentioned earlier, normally when we try to focus our mind on something, only a fraction of our mind will be focusing on that object. That's because the mental energies, the focus will be disturbed by the five senses. These five senses, the sense of sight, sense of smell, sense of hearing, sense of touch, and sense of taste, all these five senses will divide the mental focus into five, and they will take away, so that you'll be able to focus only a fraction of your mind on what you are trying to focus. That's because mind is following the dictates of the senses. When you get established yama, niyama, pranayama, pratyahara, etc., what happens, then senses will follow the mind. Otherwise, if you don't have control over our senses, what happens, senses become stronger and mind will be following the senses. That's the idea behind. Now, next chapter is Vibhudipada. Perhaps I think we'll continue discussion on dharana in the coming chapter. Deshabandhas Chittasya dharana, etc. And Tatra Pratyaganada Dhyanam. So all this dharana, dhyanam, etc. will come. Where the point where chitta is placed, in that, Pratyaganada means these jnana vrittis. Ekatanada means without any effort, your mind will flow in an unbroken continuity towards what you are focusing on. That is called ekatanada. So pratyaya ekatanada means these jnana vrittis, the different impressions will follow in one continuous unbroken succession towards that object on which you are trying to concentrate. That is dhyana. That we'll discuss later. Today, we have some time. I would like to discuss in general, and we can have an interaction, and I will take up the next chapter in the coming session. Now, we have a little more time for Q&A interaction. You are most welcome to have general discussions, because the next chapter we are entering into another aspect of Patanjala system. So you can ask questions. You are most welcome.
Pranam Maharaj.
I have. So you translated the word dharana roughly as concentration, and you said pratyahara is withdrawal of the senses.
Yeah.
I have heard pratyahara translated sometimes as watching. Is it because to withdraw the senses you need to into watching? W-A-T-C.
Oh, yeah.
Is it because that we need to withdraw the senses, cultivate a sakshi bhava, and watch the senses from a third part, from an observer's standpoint, to know, to get the sense of, get control of the senses? Is that why it is called watching? Is that the key to pratyahara?
In pratyahara, you are able to withdraw your mind, focus your mind away from external objects. So once you get established in this, then you will develop a sensitivity on how the mind is functioning. When the mind is already connected to external objects, the mind is already observed, connected to external objects. Let us say, suppose a person's mind is attracted towards an object and is working, whole mind mental focus is on that object. Then he will be able to aware of the fact that he is attracted towards that. But once he is able to withdraw his mind away from that focus, then actually he will develop a kind of higher awareness of what is going on within his own mind. So you become aware of your own emotions and feelings. I already mentioned this, I think, sometime earlier. You when you step into spiritual life, yama, niyama, even at the yama, niyama level, you find a second personality is emerging within you. To give an example, suppose a person, an individual wants to practice meditation or the spiritual disciplines. At the beginning, you will have some resistance. Mind will resist. Mind won't permit you to sit and meditate or to read a book. some higher book, to listen to some higher ideas. Mind will not frequently, mind may not permit you. Mind will be very happy if you're watching a TV, if you're watching something sensational, something eye-catching, because mind has a natural tendency to get connected to external objects. Paranjikhani Vitrana Swayambhu, Upanishad says. Mind and senses are so designed in its natural state, means in its usual state, that the senses are projected towards external things and mind flows those the senses. Now, when you actually withdraw your mind away from them by, let us say, reading a higher book, some spiritual book, or prayer, meditation, any of these things, you find there is some resistance. Sometimes our mind is not willing to cooperate. I want to sit for half an hour meditation. Mind will resist. No, you don't do that. Mind won't permit you. But if you persist, mind will start slowly cooperating. That's because a higher personality is emerging within you. And as you persist for a long time, then your mind will become more and more cooperative. It becomes more and more helpful. You find your mind is becoming more and more friendly when you try to meditate or when you try to practice any spiritual discipline. Why? Because the second personality, the higher you, who is evolving, is becoming stronger and stronger. And as you progress in spiritual life, the earlier you, the earlier personality, which did not cooperate with you when you tried to do meditation, that personality disappears and this higher you emerges.
So can this
Because
higher you, the development of this higher you, be accelerated or promoted by cultivating a Sakshi Bhava, a witness aspect, and watching and objectifying the mind?
in a Sakshi Bhava, we should not deliberately practice. It is a state of spiritual evolution. It is not something, or tomorrow onwards I shall practice witness attitude. It doesn't really come like that. Genuine spiritual state are states that we arrive at, not something that we choose. I would rather be a Sakshi. So what should I do? Should I practice this or that? It doesn't come like that. The Sakshi Bhava is not something that we can assume. It is something that we arrive at.
So it's not an abhyasa, it is a result, parinam.
It can be practiced at a higher level. It becomes natural. At the beginning itself, one should not try to do that.
Okay.
Because Sakshi Bhava involves some kind of emptying of ourselves. And that is very, very dangerous for a beginner.
Okay.
First of all, we should fill our mind with positive tendencies, higher tendencies, higher values, higher samskaras. And then, as we evolve further, you reach the Sakshi Bhava. See, Sakshi state, actually, both in Vedanta and also yoga, Sakshi state something higher. Okay, in modern times, it is sometimes used as a meditation technique. As a technique, it may help you because you can feel a kind of being detached from disturbing tendencies, but it may not have permanent benefit. Sakshi Bhava in Vedanta and Yoga is a state that we arrive at. And the first state, the first step for everyone is to cultivate a lot of good positive tendencies, samskaras. And the Sakshi meditation also can be one of those disciplines. The witness meditation can be one of the disciplines. But real Sakshi state was using your Sakshi power. Sakshi is defined in Vedanta. Bodhritva, Audasinyatva, Sakshitva. What it means is when you become aware of something and you are also not involved in it, then you are called a witness. In law, in the court of law, if you want to be considered to be a witness, you should not be party to the event of which you are a witness. At the same time, you should be aware of it. Then only you will have the credibility of being a reliable witness. So you should be non-involved, and at the same time you should be present. So you follow that same, that's the word witness in a court of law. Similarly, in Sakshi Bhava in Vedanta means you are Atman, you are in complete identity with Atman. Understand? So and so karma. You are not the actor, you are not a doer, you are not karta, bhokta, but you are the Atman. That kind of Sakshi state is a high state of spiritual practice in Vedanta. But in some Buddhist meditation practices, this is often taught. It is good because it gives you a feeling of being totally detached. Suppose you watch your mind as a witness of your own mind. In the mindfulness meditation, you can find. You watch your own mind, how it moves, how it reacts. And once you start doing that, your mind slowly becomes calm and quiet. So actually, the real you is getting detached from your own mind. You are observing your own mind. That means you are not identifying with every emotion that arises in your mind. You are getting angry, but you are not identifying yourself with the anger. So anger is a witness. Sorry, anger is object, and you are the witness watching this anger. So anger comes down. You become unnecessarily worried, and you become and you are watching your own worry. You are observing your own worry. Your worry goes down. So it's reduced. This is a very good practice. But in the Sakshi state in Vedanta is an advanced state of a spiritually enlightened person. Remember, it is not something that you assume and practice. It is something that you become one with. So please don't mix them together. But I shall come to this subject. Yeah, but I shall come to this subject, Pratyahara context, I tell you. In Pratyahara, actually, you reach a point where you observe your own mind. That's because your mind is detached, disconnected with from the external objects. So you are able to watch your own emotions when you become angry, when you become happy, when you become unhappy. You also become aware of the fact that you are becoming happy or unhappy. You become unhappy, you also become aware of your own unhappiness, so your unhappiness goes down. You're angry, you become aware of your own anger, your anger goes down. You become worried, but you become aware of the fact that you are getting worried, your worry goes down. So when you de-identify yourself from what is going in your mind, actually you're able to handle it, you're able to manage it. So in that respect, there is an element of this witness element in pratyahara. But pratyahara actually means, you are disconnecting your mental focus from external objects. And for that, you need a counter focus. And the counter focus is Bahya Dharana, means an image, a photo, a temple, a mantra, a word symbol, something you have memorized, you meditate on that, then also it is a Bahya Dharana. So that is the first step. And Yajnavalkya, of course, he is dealing with Antara Dharana, where he recommends 5 types of dharana, and there is a DT for each of these, 5 levels, 5 points, which practically not part of Patanjali's system, but I can discuss on some other occasion. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Swamiji. I had one more question, but I'll take the answer later on, Swamiji. If you could compare Shankara's Sadhana Chatushtayam to Yama Niyamas as prerequisites, how do they compare? But there are many people waiting, Swamiji. I should not take up too much time.
No, but I shall finish quickly. Those who practice Nitya Vastu Viveka, they will automatically get established in yamas and niyamas. Nitya Vastu Viveka is the first of Sadhana Chatushtaya. And Ikamutra Bharabhoga Viraga Samadhi Sukha Samriti Mumukshu. So first one is a discerning faculty to identify what is real and what is unreal, giving up the unreal and you accept the real, and then that is, and then these six disciplines, sense restraint, mental restraint, and then developmental saddha, concentration, and so on, and also an intense longing for spiritual liberation, mumukshutva. So, really speaking, anyone who practices the first one of the four disciplines, Shankaracharya recommends in the Vivekachudamani, that person automatically gets established in yamas and niyamas. That's true. Not only a sincere devotee, a sincere, honest devotee will also automatically get established in yamas and niyamas. A sincere, let us say, a sincere karma yogi who has no selfish motive, is willing to do his service, serve others without any selfish motive. That also will help him to develop these yamas and niyamas. That's why yamas and niyamas are not something that we assume and start practicing. No, it automatically comes to us when we goes for some higher ideal with all sincerity and dedication.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Yeah.
Pranam Maharaj.
Namaskar.
I'm trying to reconcile two sutras. The first one is Tatakshiyate Prakashavaranam, that
Yeah.
through practice of pranayama, the avarana is removed. And the other sutra I'm trying to connect with this is Vrittaya Panchataya.
Yeah.
Is avaranam one of those 5 types of vrittis, or is it something different?
By avarana, what is meant is not Vrittaya Panchadaya. No, the avarana here means kleshas, which I mentioned, I think, at the beginning of Sadhana Pada, you find avidya, asmita, raga, dvesha, abhinivesha, klesha, you find. In the Sadhana Pada, you find, third sutra, avidya, asmita, raga, dvesha, abhinivesha, panchaklesha. These kleshas are meant by avaranam, or it's called, sometimes called chitta malam in the Patanjali's vocabulary, which means dirt of the mind, dirt or something that should be removed of the mind. That's called, so avaranam here means something that conceals, and that concealing cover is it consists of these 5 kleshas. 5 kleshas, ignorance, egotism, attachment, aversion, and clinging to life in fear of death. That's we already discussed elaborately in the earlier sessions. At the beginning, maybe the 5th or 6th class, there's a very detailed discussion on the 3rd sutra, avidya, asmita, raga, dvesha, abhinivesha, panchaklesha. Those panchakleshas are meant by the avaranam, the concealing veil that conceals the light of the chitta. That's the idea behind. The
Thank
next
you,
one, what you mentioned, the other sutra you mentioned?
Vrittaya Panchataya.
Oh, that different. Vrittaya Panchadaya different. Yeah.
That is different. Thank you, Maharaj.
Vrittis are different. Of course, kleshas and vrittis are related, but they cannot be identical. One cannot be the other. They are linked, they are related, but still.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Thank you.
Maharaj, I
Yeah.
have a question on dharana or meditation.
Yeah.
So beginners may not be equipped with nama, like yama and niyama properly. So is there like a healthy time frame for dharana a beginner should do, or like let's say if they are got the initiation, so is there like time frame they should do meditation? Or
Could you repeat once more?
my question is like is there a time frame like for a healthy meditation, if like
Oh, yeah. There is no time frame as such. Sometimes if you go, let's say in ancient times, when you went to some spiritual teacher, the teacher will ask you to spend 1 year in the Gurukula. If you go for instruction, even the Vedas or any of these Shastras, any of the ancient sciences, whenever a student arrived in the Vedic hermitage, the teacher will instruct him to remain there for 1 year practicing this Sattha, Brahmacharya, dedication, Susrusha, humility, all these qualities. So that was the ancient practice, in fact. So when a person lives in a hermitage or any place, in your own home, you can, with your job at hand, whatever job you are doing, along with that, you can still practice. I'm talking about ancient tradition. So these teachers used to insist on the student, you remain here for 1 year, practicing all these disciplines. So they won't mention yamas and niyamas. What they do, every day you should morning get up, you should chant Veda mantras, you should go to the forest, you should collect twigs for homa, the fire sacrifices. Then you should look after the asthma responsibilities, and then you should study. And in the morning and evening you should do this some fire sacrifices and all that. It's normal practice in ancient times. So during this time, this person will automatically will observe and imbibe ahimsa, satya, asteya, brahmacharya, of course, these persons must have come with great sincerity and honesty. Actually, when you take a decision to start living a higher life, at that very moment, you will naturally start practicing some of these values. Because you have an aspiration to do something higher, to practice some spiritual discipline. Only when you have succeeded in taking your mind away from violence or greed or any such undesirable tendencies. Even a strong desire to live a higher life will help you to assume these qualities. It's not something that should take a long time. So this is an important point. Yeah.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Okay.
Hariom
I want to
Swamiji.
mention something because it's very important in this context. Remember, I said this earlier. Now, if you look at the subject we discussed, yama, niyama, asana. So asana comes third. So you should not get away with the impression, oh, I won't do any, I won't go and study yoga asanas because I don't know whether I'm established yamas and niyamas. You should not get away with that impression. If you are practicing normal yoga asanas for a few yoga asanas, not highly complicated things, for health, you should not discourage yourself. You should go ahead with that. Because once you understand this, then you will know I should not do certain things because that may not be induce you to make practice of yoga. So once you understand this, it's okay. That's all. We should not get away. First 1 year I shall practice yama niyamas. Next year I shall practice asana. No, we should not get away with that impression. If you are already practicing yoga asanas, go ahead. But remember, it is important to practice certain disciplines to get the full benefit of whatever you are practicing. Pranayama is something different. Pranayama can be harmful if not done properly, especially if you do for a long time without proper discipline, it can be positively harmful, which even medical science will tell you. It's a different subject. But simple yogasanas are very good. It should be encouraged. We should not worry about it. That's all.
Hariom Swamiji. My question is actually very, very similar to Jatin's question, which is So you were talking about meditation. So you just spoke about pranayama being harmful if it's not done the right way. I'm guessing meditation is also like that, right? So does one practice meditation, or is it something you can actually develop by practicing, or is it necessary for yamas and niyamas to be developed before?
Yeah, I can tell you from my own experience after coming to the United States. Now, there have been quite a few cases where people started learning pranayama from YouTube or maybe internet, and they practice meditation also, getting some mantras from YouTube at midnight and all that. Really got into trouble. That is dangerous. Otherwise, simple meditation, prayer is wonderful. Nothing wrong in it. In fact, meditation is part of a regular puja, and nobody faces any problem by doing that. Simple meditation, pranayama, become form part of a puja ritual. Actually, there's no problem in that. Everyone does it, and there is no problem. What we're talking about, intense practice of prolonged and difficult practices, because and there have been many people, and I myself had to encounter a few cases where people start practicing pranayama and meditation at night. You work for 14 hours, 15 hours in your office, and then you come to your home and you start meditating and pranayama at midnight, 12 o'clock, in loneliness, solitude, can be positively harmful. You will have delusions. Sometimes, pranayama can cause mind wandering, can cause flight of thoughts, incessant conversation, incessant flow of disconnected thought currents. All this can happen, excitement, and so on. This could happen, but not when you do simple pranayama or when you do meditation as part of your prayer, spiritual practice. No problem. Absolutely. We are talking about a tendency found among many people to learn all these from internet or modern social media, and then starting practice for long hours. That can cause problems. That's all. Simple pranayama meditation, absolutely have no problem.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Hi, Swamiji.
Yeah.
You talked about feeding our mind good things through books we read, what we consume.
Yeah.
You often mention authors like Tolstoy, Dostoevsky, and others like that.
Yeah.
What kinds of novels or literature do you recommend that we read that would feed those good thoughts and spiritual thoughts to our mind?
Yeah. I won't recommend Dostoevsky for a beginner in spiritual life. Never. It's something, never. So what I mean to say, let's say, there are great books in all religious traditions. When we talk about higher books by reading which we can get higher values, we're talking about, let's say, the parables of Jesus, the Sermon on the Mount, Bhagavad Gita, the Upanishads, maybe the Torah, such books, Jewish tradition, Christian tradition, Hindu tradition, Dhammapada in Buddhist tradition. There are great books, great ideas in all traditions. These are some of the books that I normally recommend as sources of spiritual food, not mainstream literature. Mainstream literature can give you an idea of how people, different tendencies, different psychological structures, mindsets react to different situations. But for one's own spiritual progress, I will always recommend books written by great men and women who have themselves led spiritual lives. Such books are available in all traditions. Those books constitute wonderful sources of spiritual food. When you think of what you read, you feel a great inner joy and tranquility and peace. That's one proof. You feel, and this one proof frequently mentioned. Suppose you read a book and then you are able to say, well, by reading this book, now I understand. All these are very good part our everyday life experiences, wealth, job, all these are important, but there is something higher, something transcendental that is important. And slowly you are able to get attracted towards this higher transcendental spiritual idea. If you get this, if you are inspired enough to think along these lines by reading a book, that book has given you spiritual food. That's it. That's what I'm talking. Not something that gives us some temporary, fleeting moments of excitement or happiness. No, but something, a book or any work that gives us some higher ideas, some higher ideals that we should strive to achieve and realize in our life. Such books constitute wonderful sources of spiritual food. That's what I'm talking about.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Namaste Maharaj. There are 3 questions on YouTube that I will ask. So the first question is from Kumar Kantirava. So he asks, Ahimsa is one of the yamas. Is vegetarian diet part of Ahimsa? What is Patanjali's opinion here?
Yeah. Patanjali doesn't mention and refer to vegetarianism as such. But for a beginner in spiritual life, vegetarian food will certainly be helpful in developing non-violent tendencies, non-violent attitude. There's no doubt about it. But you should remember, vegetarianism as such should not be equated with Ahimsa as understood in the Patanjali system or Vedanta system. I want to be very specific in this matter. Vegetarianism is very helpful. I'm a vegetarian, that's because of my culture, my generations of vegetarians who can't go anywhere near anything non-vegetarian. But that's a culture I'm born into. But at the same time, let us think of Buddha or Jesus Christ. Christ was born in a non-vegetarian socio-cultural anthropological landscape background. Buddha died of eating meat, which is every Buddhist monk should accept whatever is given in those times. Remember, there were Buddhist monasteries in places like Afghanistan where there was not much vegetarian activities or agriculture. So you should always remember, vegetarianism is not an absolute condition for practicing ahimsa. I often give the example. Of course, I cannot think of a better example, so I am repeating the same example. Hitler was a non-vegetarian, you may have heard of this. Hitler actually became a cutthroat vegetarian. Sorry, I made a mistake. Hitler was a cutthroat vegetarian. He completely gave up non-vegetarian food at some stage in his life. And he was very compassionate towards animals, it is said. And he became a cutthroat vegetarian. Christ was a non-vegetarian. Now, where do you draw the line? Christ was a non-vegetarian. You can find these parables, the fish parable and so on. And all the parable, prodigal son returned. The father cooked the finest animal, the lamb, as a show of affection. Because that is a socio-cultural background, which is essentially non-vegetarian. Hitler became a cutthroat vegetarian, but he was certainly not a very non-violent person, as everyone knows. So we should be very careful when we try to interpret a high spiritual ideal uh, in the language of eating habits or eating culture. But still, it is certainly good for a beginner to practice vegetarianism in order to practice ahimsa. But remember, all non-vegetarians are not violent, and all vegetarians are not non-violent. That's all we have to remember.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Yeah.
So there's the next question from Praja 343.
Yeah.
It's about Karma Yoga.
Yeah.
Part of Karma Yoga, that is dedicated, efficient effort, results in Chitta Shuddhi or clarity and purity of thought process.
Yeah.
Is this the state that is achieved by the effort outlined by Patanjali?
Yeah, I will tell you. You know, this point you mentioned is actually Shankaracharya's important statement in the Gita Bhashya. Karma nishthayaha chitta suddhi dvarena purushartha hedutvam na swatantrena jnana nisthadu swatantrena purushartha hetuhu anyan apeksha. This is the outline of this karma, the evolution of karma yoga leading up to chitta suddhi. A person who practices karma yoga, that means practice of one's own duty, doing one's own duty without any selfish motive. Gradually, that person will reach a state of chitta suddhi, sattva suddhi, mental purity. And once you attain mental purity, you will have jnana prapti, with dawn of absolute spiritual enlightenment and liberation. This Shankara's scheme, Adi Shankaracharya's scheme. Now, Patanjali. Now remember, Patanjali Yoga Sutra, that is Ashtanga Yoga, Yama Niyama Asana Pranayama Pratyahara Dharana Dhyana Samadhi. These 8 disciplines will not be enough to take you to moksha, according to Adi Shankaracharya's Vedanta. But it will certainly help you to attain Chitta Suddhi, mental purity, purity of mind, which is essential for attaining the highest spiritual liberation and enlightenment. No doubt about it. So it is correct to say that Patanjali's system can indirectly help you to attain moksha or liberation as mentioned in Shankaracharya's Advaita. But as Shankaracharya says, you should begin with Nishkama Karma, Karma Yoga, and then your mind will become pure. And when you attain mental purity, Chitta Shuddhi, immediately you get Jnana Prapti, knowledge, spiritual realization, and liberation. Patanjali doesn't think of this kind of liberation. That's a very important point. Patanjali system is a dualistic system. It is not a Dvaita. Totally different. But Patanjali system is very important because it gives you a very detailed graphic description of the evolution of a spiritual seeker from very beginning, from kindergarten, like yamas and niyamas, and there is a very well laid out program in Patanjali system for you to attain mental purity. Instead of going through karma yoga, you can practice Ashtanga yoga. But remember, Ashtanga yoga comes to the end of the sadhana pada. But sadhana pada begins with kriya yoga. Tapaswadhyaya Ishvara Pranidhananani Kriya Yoga. In that Kriya Yoga, Karma Yoga is also included according to some of the commentators like Vajaspati Misra and others. Karma Yoga becomes part of Kriya Yoga. And Kriya Yoga eventually leads to Ashtanga Yoga. Remember? So, in the absolute sense, Patanjali and Shankaracharya, they agree on one point. But remember, Patanjali's Samadhi is not equivalent to what we understand by the word moksha in Vedanta philosophy. That's an important point.
Thank you, Maharaj. That's so beautiful. One last question here on YouTube. Is it really possible to conquer lust? The conquer lust?
Yeah, it is possible. It is possible. But
Second part, just complete the whole question. The constant internal fight against lust, is it fine, or is it okay to use it as one method of relaxation? That's the
yeah.
question. Okay.
No, one should try to sublimate one's desire. Sublimation of desire is discussed in the commentaries on Patanjali system. Prathipaksha Bhavanam is a mechanism that Patanjali directly recommends. So when you are facing an obstacle like this lust or any greed or whatever it is, you should concentrate on its counterpoint, counter value. Suppose suppose a person is so much greedy, then he should think of so many people who have come to grief because of greed, and how money and wealth cannot give you peace and happiness. So these are the thought currents one should bring to one's mind to counteract and neutralize greed. Similarly, when these problems of lust comes, one should remember what is after all human body mechanism. It is nothing but a skin bag which contains things that we can't go near without washing our hands. So remember, whatever comes out of the body, we should wash our hands before eating food, and that food is again going to become that, which again will take another form, which again the same. So if you are a philosopher, it doesn't take long time for us to realize the true nature of this human body mechanism. So some of these thoughts will be helpful for any spiritual seeker to transcend some of these obstacles. Yeah. And again, another thing, there is such called sublimation of our focus. If one focus is creating problems, then we should go for a higher focus. So that is Patanjali recommends actually as a counter focus, counter thought to neutralize an undesirable thought currents.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Thank you.
At 7:30, if you're okay to take one question.
No, we will continue. We will stop now. Already we had a long discussion, and thank you for those questions. Thank you to those. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Maharaj.
We will begin the next chapter in the coming session. Thank you. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tatsat Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu. I can make a request to some of you. Some of you ask questions. You are most, I mean, some of you write questions to our general email address. You can, and some of you ask for details, how to get information about our programs. So you can subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can use our website, and you can become our subscribers. You're most welcome. Thank you. Namaskar.